Australia and New Zealand, 1 in 9 people suffer from asthma. Over 400 people in Australia and over 70 people in New Zealand die from the disease every year. To get the facts on asthma and to chat about some promising new research that has come out, we have with us Asthma Australia CEO Michele Goldman. Michele, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We want to get a little bit of the lowdown on asthma. First of all, we're going to start. What is asthma? What does it do?
Yeah, so a number of things happen in the airways when you have asthma. The muscles around the airways constrict, making the airway passages more narrow. Mucus is produced, clogging up the airways. And those kind of things and inflammation in the airways make the airway passages even more narrow. So it's very difficult for air to pass through and consequently you struggle to breathe.
So what are the things that trigger it and can that be controlled?
There are hundreds of different things that can trigger asthma.
Oh, right.
So the one thing about asthma is it's a very individual disease. Everything from pollen to dust to cockroach feces to tobacco smoke to laughter. Even sex can be a trigger for asthma.
Unlucky.
Unfortunately for some people. So it's really about understanding what triggers your asthma, and yes, it's important to try and avoid exposure to those kind of things. But more importantly is to be on the right medication so that even when you do come into contact with a trigger, hopefully you don't have symptoms.
So how do you know if your child has asthma?
It's a very good question. So there's a number of different symptoms. Most people know that if you're breathless or wheezy, it could be asthma. But what's less well known is that it could be a persistent cough, and often flus and viruses are a very common trigger for asthma. So we have a lot of mums calling us and saying, you know, had this persistent cough for a number of weeks now, it just doesn't seem to go away. Well, you should talk to your doctor and ask, could it be asthma? And also a tightness in the chest, which for young children is very difficult to describe. So sometimes diagnosing asthma can be very challenging.
It's very interesting because my son, he's 2 now, but in the last few years, like whenever he's fallen sick and stuff like that, he's been put on the nebulizer. The doctor says that he's got bronchiolitis. They refuse to call it asthma and say that he doesn't have asthma. So does he or does he not?
Yeah. It's an excellent question and one that's asked by many other mums like yourself. Doctors are reluctant to diagnose asthma before 5 because there's something called childhood wheeze. Whether it's asthma or not is less relevant because the symptoms are the same and the treatment is the same. So what's important is that you can recognise when he is getting wheezy and when he does need the nebulizer or other types of treatment. Some children will grow out of that childhood wheeze after the age of 5, and so then they haven't been labelled as having asthma.
But his father has asthma as well, so am I saying genetics, that's it, he's definitely...
Genetics definitely play a part in it. So if you've got one parent with asthma, you've got a 25% chance of getting asthma, and if you've got 2 parents, then that goes up to 50%. So it's partly genetic and partly environmental.
Because Australia seems to be like the country where we have the most asthmatics. So it can be environmental as well. It's not just your genetics.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can be genetically predisposed to having asthma, but it's coming into contact with things in the environment that actually turn on that switch when you have your first symptoms or a flare-up that requires you to visit the hospital, unfortunately.
That would be Australia for Rachel.
Yeah, personally, I've developed asthma since moving to Australia, and so that was quite shocking for me. I remember going for a run and feeling like, who's the old man who's running next to me, and it was me. So I didn't realize that you could develop it so late in life.
Yeah. Another common misconception that asthma is a childhood disease. You can develop asthma at any age. My mother-in-law developed it in her 60s.
Wow. Does that make it environmental if that's the case, though, when you develop it later in life?
It could be. You know, your body's changing, you're going through all different things. It could be related to hormones. The one thing about asthma is whilst it's really common, we still don't really understand what causes it and we don't have a cure. It is a complex, individual, mysterious disease.
Is it more common in one gender than the other? Because I have heard that it's more severe in the women or the girls that it's in, but what crack the myth for me.
Yeah, so what the stats show is up to the age of 14, it's more prevalent in boys, but after that, it's much higher prevalence amongst females.
Oh, do we know why?
We don't know why.
Right, yeah, the jury's still...
The body's a fascinating thing.
Do you see that the body kind of heals itself maybe at that 14 mark, or are girls developing it more after 14, or boys kind of their symptoms?
So certainly boys going through adolescence and their lungs growing larger and stronger and having greater capacity could be one explanation for why they tend to have less asthma after the age of 14, or less likely to develop it after 14. More research is needed.
Yeah.
I was saying earlier that there's, over 400 Australians that die from this each year. Could they... I'm trying to think of how to word this. Is there a reason for this? Are they taking it? Are they being complacent? Like, why are we seeing this?
Yes, sadly 400 Australians are still dying each year, and that should not be the case. Although there's still a lot that we have to learn about asthma, we have some great treatments available. We've got some of the best guidelines in the world. No one should be dying from asthma in Australia. So it is often people with milder asthma that don't really take it seriously. They might have a few symptoms, sort of dismiss it, I should be okay. An asthma attack can come on really quickly and require you to be hospitalised. And as we always say, you can live without food for weeks, water for days, but air for only minutes. So it's really important, if you do have symptoms, don't dismiss them, take them seriously, take your medication, your reliever medication, and if that doesn't help,
So what is the new research telling us? Like, is there something out there to give people hope?
Yep. There's always some exciting research that's been undertaken. Just recently, we had some exciting outcomes from research done by the Hunter Medical Research Institute amongst pregnant women. So the best chance of eradicating asthma is preventing it from happening in the first place. And this provided optimal treatment to a group of pregnant women, monitored their breathing while pregnant, and what it found was that it reduced the risk of their children developing asthma by half.
Wow. So does that mean those kids never get it, or they may get it later in life? Or?
They could possibly get it later in life, but certainly there were two arms to this research, and the arm that had optimal treatment during pregnancy, only around a quarter of the children developed asthma, versus the other arm, who still had normal treatment, where half the children were developing asthma.
Oh, wow. So what's the next phase? Like, can you start doing this treatment with more people on a wider basis?
So the next phase is a larger research study with more women. It involves a piece of equipment that needs to be made available to general practices, but it's really exciting, promising research, because if we can prevent people from developing asthma in the first place, we can certainly start to tackle the disease in serious ways.
Yeah, so talk to me about an asthma action plan, because I know you guys have them, I know you suggest them, but what is that?
So an asthma action plan is a written set of instructions that you'll develop together with your GP, and it's basically so you can recognise when your asthma is getting worse and what steps you should take. And people who have a written asthma action plan definitely have better asthma health outcomes. So we would encourage everyone to get one.
So do most schools understand asthma and how to treat it? Because, we have sports days and swimming carnivals and all these things, and small children who can't necessarily express they're in trouble.
Absolutely. So every school should, and I think do, require every child with asthma to have an asthma action plan. So the staff in that school can recognise when Johnny's asthma is getting worse and know what steps they need to take for Johnny to ensure that they provide fast relief. First aid equipment is really important. Asthma Australia provides first aid training to many staff in schools around Australia. It's critical. If someone's struggling to breathe, you need to respond quickly. So we want to ensure as many staff know what to do in an asthma emergency.
Is there any apps out there that people can tap into to use it all to sort of make the process easier?
Yeah, great question. Asthma Australia has a number of apps. You can go to our website, asthmaaustralia.org.au. We have apps that allow you to monitor your symptoms. We've got a first aid app, so in the moment when your mind goes blank and you don't know what to do, we've got an app that can help talk you through it.
That sounds really good. Like, there are lots of steps out there that people can sort of take to make it more manageable. So look, thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing that information. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Ladies, always a pleasure to have you here. Don't forget, if you've seen anything on our show today that you want to see more of, or any other segments, jump onto our Facebook page. You can have a look there. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Have a good one. Bye for now.